Hi guys, welcome to Boring History for Sleep today. We're exploring the life of medieval court jesters, from their forced recruitment and endless performances to their hidden power as truth speakers. We'll also journey through the origins of ancient theater in Greece, Rome, India, China, Japan, uncover how these traditions shaped modern drama. Finally, we'll follow the remarkable story of Senain and Princess Ada, whose rise and tragic fall illustrates the brutal politics of antiquity. If you love rich dives into forgotten history, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button and comment below with the fact that surprised you most. As we explored in the introduction, the path to becoming a medieval court jester was hardly one paved with voluntary ambition or romantic allure. Instead, from the bustling towns of 12th century France to the grand palaces of 14th century England, a jester's life was often shaped by forces beyond their control. No resume was ever submitted, no open auditions ever posted. Rather, individuals were selected, summoned, or even traded into service based on traits that set them starkly apart. Unconventional physical appearances, uncanny talents for mimicry, or disabilities that rendered them objects of both fascination and pity. In this first chapter, we step into the illuminated halls of medieval courts to uncover how these remarkable men and occasionally women were chosen to don motley and bells, becoming the living embodiment of humor and, paradoxically, truth. Picture yourself at the threshold of a great hall tapestries depicting heroic battles hang along walls of dark oak. Braziers sputter embers that cast dancing shadows across marble floors. Courtiers draped in velvet and silk cluster around gilded tables, their jeweled goblets clinking in anticipation of the evening's diversions. Suddenly, all eyes, some curious, others condescending, shift toward you. Perhaps it is your height, barely a handspan above the stone dais, or the irregular curve of your spine that draws their gaze. Perhaps it is the quicksilver glint in your eyes, hinting at a wit as sharp as a knight's blade. In that instant, your difference ceases to be merely personal. It becomes your currency. Lords and ladies, ever eager to showcase curiosities, prized those whose bodies or talents defied expectation. A birthmark spanning cheek to chin could be seen as a divine sign. Bright, misaligned eyes might be whispered to reveal hidden clairvoyance. Such individuals were plucked from anonymity and thrust before audiences of privilege, their very presence a spectacle. But physical oddities were just one avenue. Overland trade routes did more than carry spices and silks. They carried tales of a peasant whose laughter rang louder than church bells, or a shepherd whose mimicry of birds could silence a barn full of goats. Noble emissaries dispatched with purses heavy with coins scoured provincial fairs and roadside inns for such performers. Local magistrates, anxious to curry favor with their liege, would discreetly slip payment to a talented beggar who could coax a crowd into tears of mirth. In these clandestine transactions, the entertainer felt the heady rush of transformation, momentarily moving from street corners into the sumptuous glow of candlelit courts, where prestige replaced poverty. For others, the route was darker still. In an age when personal freedom could be subsumed by the demands of power, some were bought, sold, or even kidnapped into jester service. Royal ledgers from the 13th century record expenditures for fools alongside horses and hunting dogs, as though they were livestock to be traded at market. Monarchs would include a renowned jester as a clause in diplomatic treaties, exchanging the man for territories or precious gems. To possess a jester of exceptional comic flair was to claim a cultural trophy, proof of a court's refinement and divine favor. For the individual, however, such exchanges meant an abrupt severance from all previous life, an irrevocable slide from autonomy into the gilded cage of court expectations. Gender and lineage added further complication. While most chronicled jesters were men, a few women slipped into court life under tambourine and veil. In the Italian city-states, a witty jestress might be celebrated for blending satire with song, her verses weaving moral lessons into courtly amusement. Elsewhere, celebrity families of jesters emerged passing motley from parent to child like a hereditary title. These dynasties honed their craft in the back alleys of traveling troupes before catching the eye of a patron. When a young scion of a jester family arrived bearing the family's well-worn scepter, a carved fool's head on a slender staff, they stepped onto a stage already laid before them by ancestors. Once identified, the transformation was as ceremonious as a knight's dubbing. Court tailors stitched motley tunics in clashing hues to exaggerate the jester's silhouette. Caps topped with jingling bells were fitted to announce each entrance. A polished scepter cemented status, proclaiming, "Here stands our licensed fool, free to mock without reproach." Craftsmen forged props, juggling clubs, tiny whistles for bird calls, and intricately carved masks to amplify every gesture and guffaw. Thus outfitted, the jester emerged each day as both entertainer and social commentator, their role extending beyond mere merriment into the delicate art of speaking truth through laughter. Yet selection carried peril. One poorly timed quip at a jealous lord's expense could end in exile, imprisonment, or worse. Tales abound of a jester whose ill-advised insult landed him atop the moat's parapet, his motley tunic tossed away like refuse. In some courts, jesters who failed to amuse were dismissed into obscurity. In others, they faced public humiliation or corporal punishment. The license to satirize came tethered to unspoken boundaries step beyond them, and the laughter stopped, as did the jester's safety. Through this process of recruitment, the medieval court jester epitomized the intersection of spectacle and sovereignty. Rulers commodified difference, converting unique bodies and talents into courtly adornments. At the same time, humor became a diplomatic instrument, jesters acting as subtle emissaries, their performances softening disputes or brokering alliances with well-placed ridicule. In this fragile balance, the margins of society found a peculiar stage, a space where those deemed other could wield a fleeting power, chipping away at hierarchy one jest at a time. As we move deeper into our exploration, remember that the jester's journey began long before he stepped into the great hall under candlelight. Their selection was dictated by whim and circumstance, by bartered silver and whispered recommendations. It was a path forged at the nexus of individual anomaly and institutional desire, a paradoxical rite of passage that would echo through the annals of performance history for centuries to come. If the jester's recruitment was a matter of being singled out for one unforgettable performance, his daily survival depended on performing without pause. The moment our newly minted fool jingled across the polished threshold, he discovered that the motley was not simply a uniform, but a 24-hour summons. Courtiers expected entertainment at every flicker of boredom. Stewards delivered requests as though ordering wine. A jester might be roused at dawn to parody the bishop's Latin benediction, only to tumble into bed after midnight, having juggled candlesticks for visiting envoys whose appetites for laughter proved larger than their banquets. Strict hierarchy amplified the pressure. Knights, ladies-in-waiting, even visiting merchants claimed the right to summon comedy on demand, invoking the monarch's pleasure as justification. Denying any request, however trivial or exhausting, constituted insubordination. Chroniclers tell of Roland the Short, who once refused to dance for a tipsy page and was stripped chained to a cart and paraded around the courtyard until dawn. The lesson was clear. Laughter was not a luxury, but an obligation, a portable festival strapped to the fool's back wherever he went. Such intuitions became a second language. Contemporary account books reveal payments for bells of alertness, small silver charms attached to the fool's cap explicitly to keep him awake during long winter banquets. If his nodding caused those bells to jingle out of rhythm, a marshal stationed behind the dais would jab him with a willow rod. Sleep itself transformed into a theatrical interlude. Jesters learned to snore, melodically pretend to dream of courtly triumphs, or feign night terrors that made the queen giggle behind her fan, buying themselves a few seconds of rest beneath the laughter they orchestrated. Food and drink offered no refuge. A jester's dinner was seldom consumed privately. Instead, he performed comic carving, slicing a roast goose while reciting bawdy verse, or drinking from a flagon while making the liquid spurt theatrically through his teeth. If he choked, spilled, or lacked wit, he risked punishment ranging from forfeiture of his meager wage to a dunking in the horse trough. Some courts institutionalized the harassment during Lent. The fool was force-fed bitter herbs and expected to grin as tears rolled down his cheeks, the pain itself becoming the evening's punchline. Even travel failed to lessen the burden. When the royal household migrated between castles, jesters rode at the center of the baggage train, performing roadside pantomimes to placate restless soldiers and impress villagers who lined the muddy routes. They composed satirical couplets about potholes weather or the lead horse's flatulence, all while balancing atop a swaying pack saddle. Should rain soak their motley, it was still forbidden to hide beneath the wagons. Soggy colors merely furnished new material for mocking poems about courtly vanity. Punishments for failing to amuse were inventive and cruel. One manuscript details the fool's stocks, a hinged wooden yoke that held the head and hands while leaving the jester's backside available for the kitchen staff to toss scraps at leisure. Another recounts the practice of mirror justice, where a fool who delivered a joke that angered the queen was forced to repeat it, backward syllable by syllable, before a silent audience until his voice broke. Such torments underscored a grim arithmetic. Each laugh delayed multiplied the risk of pain, yet peril bred ingenuity. To survive, jesters mastered what modern performers might call crowd work. They rotated through a mental armory of quips, calibrated to rank gentle puns for bishops, bawdy limericks, for squires, veiled political barbs, for ministers who fancied themselves untouchable. They cultivated alliances with kitchen maids, stable boys, and scribes, bartering gossip for advance warning of noble tempers. Some perfected musical mimicry, turning barnyard sounds into impromptu chorales that could drown a lord's rant in rooster crow and donkey bray, salvaging spirits before tempers snapped. Still, the toll proved measurable. Forced cheer eroded even nimble minds, leaving hollows behind the eyes where laughter once began. Private journals, rare because literacy among fools was uncommon, speak of aching jaws, bruised ribs, and an emptiness deeper than the castle wells. The motley, once a badge of novelty, became chainmail of obligation, each patch a brightly colored debt. When fever struck, fools were expected to satirize their own pallor, coughing as percussion tremors as slapstick. Compassion was rationed. A physician would visit only if the king's hound also needed care, and the fool usually returned to service before the dog's stitches came out. Years of such demands, carved lines no rouge could hide, so many jesters adopted painted smiles that outlasted the skin beneath a final mask against despair. And yet, amid this relentless treadmill of jokes and jeopardy, the jester's ceaseless labor unlocked a vantage available to no knight or chancellor. Because hierarchy discounted his humanity, nobles spoke candidly before him, confident that rank insulated them from any barbs he might sling. The fool memorized those whispered confessions, then repackaged them as fables staged in plain sight disguising treachery beneath talking animals or scandal behind riddles. Courtiers laughed, only half aware that each quip mapped their own vices. Survival required daring balance too mild, and he lost relevance. Too sharp, and he met the stocks. By modulating satire like a lute string, the jester converted constant performance into a covert form of critique, a mirror polished with sweat and fear. That mirror, as we shall see next, could sometimes redirect history's course with nothing more than a well-timed joke. Soon we'll witness jokes tip thrones, pardon traitors, and reshape royal fates. If Point 2 revealed how relentless performance forged the jester's reflexes, Point 3 exposes what those sharpened senses could accomplish: weaponized truth. Day after day, the fool mined the laughter of lords, but night after night, he sifted those same chuckles for veins of fear, vanity, and ambition. In time, the jingle in his cap ceased to be mere stagecraft and evolved into the soft percussion that announced an unofficial auditor, someone uniquely licensed to polish the tarnished mirror of power and hold it up for the mighty to see themselves. From the monarch's perspective, this arrangement seemed both practical and perilous. A court could suppress critical pamphlets or silence a bishop's sermon, but it could hardly outlaw jest. Satire, after all, arrived disguised as diversion, its barbs wrapped in rhyme and pratfalls. By decreeing that only the royal fool might lampoon the king, rulers created a controlled burn, better a single sanctioned spark than a wildfire of dissent. Thus, the jester's tongue, shackled by proximity, yet freed by privilege, became the court's most accurate barometer. A quip that earned polite smiles signaled moderate discontent. A joke that provoked roaring applause warned of unrest boiling beneath jewel-bright brocades. One legendary example survives in the chronicles of Henry II of England. During tense negotiations over a proposed salt tax, Henry's jester Rahir performed a farce in which a starving peasant attempted to season thin gruel with tears because salt had grown unaffordable. The scene drew thunderous laughter from barons who intended to profit from the levy. Yet Henry heard something sharper in the room's echo. If nobles chuckled so freely at the peasants' misery, the villages might soon howl in revolt. According to the chronicler Gervase of Tilbury, the king left the hall in somber silence, and by sunrise the proposed tax was quietly withdrawn. Rahir's foolery accomplished what no counselor dared. He translated rumor into theater and offered his sovereign a face-saving path away from folly. Jesters also served as human couriers of confidential intelligence. Unlike clerks who wrote everything down, or guards whose armor announced them a fool, slipped unnoticed through every social stratum. He might juggle in the kitchens while overhearing a butler grumble about dwindling grain stores. Later that evening, while entertaining the chamberlain, he could confirm that the shortage stemmed from a corrupt granary keeper. At dawn, during the king's private prayers, the jester might recount a ribald parable whose moral pointed unmistakably toward the guilty official. The monarch amused, yet informed, could act without ever revealing his source. In this way, the bells on a jester's cap rang like tiny keys, unlocking doors that formal spies could never breach. Naturally, such clandestine influence spawned intrigue of its own. Rival courtiers vied for a fool's favor, slipping him sweetmeats or whispered promises in exchange for advance notice of the next satirical target. The savviest jesters accepted every bribe, then used the information to craft even sharper skits exposing briber and victim alike in a single hilarious stroke. One French fool, Triboulet, immortalized this tactic at the court of Francis I. Having been paid by two warring dukes to ridicule the other Triboulet, composed a play in which Duke A bribed a clown to mock Duke B, only to discover the clown had also pocketed hush money from Duke B. The audience shrieked with delight as each duke recognized his own folly, and the king, tears of mirth streaming down his cheeks, pardoned Triboulet's duplicity on the spot. Yet the jester's latitude had invisible borders. Satire that merely bruised vanity was tolerated. Satire that threatened legitimacy was not. The Scottish fool George Buchanan famously penned verses accusing Regent Morton of embezzlement under the thin guise of Roman allegory. When Morton deciphered the code, he ordered Buchanan's imprisonment. Only the intervention of Queen Mary, who valued Buchanan's wit, and more importantly, recognized that silencing him would confirm the rumors, secured his release. The incident underscored a stark equation. The jester walked a tightrope, where every truthful jest lengthened his stride, yet frayed the rope itself. Because their critique operated in plain sight, fools refined the art of allegory into a precision weapon. Animals spoke with noble accents. Playing cards quarreled like feuding families. Astrological signs debated succession laws. These masquerades allowed the court to laugh at itself without admitting culpability. Over time, audiences learned to decode this argot, turning each performance into a shared secret. When a jester portrayed the lion devouring the fox, everyone understood. The lion was the crown, and the fox a scheming minister. If the next week's play showed the lion choking on feathers, rumor spread that the minister had regained favor. In this way, the fool became both performer and publisher, orchestrating a living editorial page whose ink was pure laughter. The impact rippled far beyond palace walls. Traveling minstrels carried second-hand versions of a jester's jokes to marketplaces and taverns where commoners riffed and embroidered them into folk tales. What began as a courtly in-joke about grain speculation might morph by the time it reached a distant shire into a cautionary fable about greedy reeves. Thus, the fool's satire seeded a decentralized network of commentary, an early social media whose posts arrived in song rather than script. Power could muzzle heralds and decree silence in the public square, but it could never fully erase a tune catchy enough to whistle while threshing wheat. Still, the mirror's clarity extracted a personal cost. Each barb that landed drew either gratitude or resentment. Sometimes, both emotions brewed inside the same prince. A jester needed impeccable instinct to know when to twist the knife and when to offer balm. Some adopted rotating repertoires, cutting satire one week, gentle slapstick the next, to prevent any single grievance from festering. Others cultivated a persona of holy foolishness, claiming divine inspiration for their jokes so no mortal could stay offended for long. Despite such strategies, the list of fools who vanished after an ill-timed jest is sobering. Whether dispatched to distant monasteries for reflection or found floating face down in castle moats, they remind us that the mirror could shatter without warning. Yet for all its menace, this role bestowed the rarest privilege in feudal society, the right, however precarious, to speak. In an age when silence equaled safety and subservience was stitched into every class, the fool alone could name hypocrisy in the very moment it occurred. His motley thus became more than costume. It was a living treaty between laughter and authority, renewed each night under chandeliers of beeswax. The court accepted that treaty not out of benevolence, but necessity, for without the fool's honest echo chambers would fill only with flattery until decisions rotted from within. So while Point 2 mapped the punishing treadmill of perpetual performance, Point 3 reveals the secret engine that kept the fool sprinting influence. Every jest balanced survival against significance, each laugh measuring the pulse of power itself. But influence is fickle capital, and courts are notorious for turning yesterday's oracle into today's liability. In Point 4, we'll follow what happens when the bells fall silent, when a fool's wit dulls his patron's age, or a single joke slices too deep, and discover the bleak prospects awaiting those whose mirrors are finally deemed too dangerous to keep. If Point 3 revealed the jester as a razor-tongued oracle whose jokes could tilt a throne, Point 4 examines the brutal truth. His bells could never drown out in a feudal world that commodified talent and difference. The fool's influence expired the moment his laughter lost market value. Power listened only so long as the mirror it gazed into returned a flattering, or at least illuminating, reflection. Once the glass cracked, the hand that once applauded swiftly shoved the jester toward the shadows, and there was no sanctioned path back to daylight. The unraveling often began imperceptibly. A cough lingered longer than usual, stealing wind needed for rapid-fire wordplay. A swollen knuckle stiffened, turning deft juggling into clumsy clangs on the flagstones. The audience would still chuckle, part habit, part pity. But the timbre of that laughter shifted landings softer, trailing off sooner like a candle sputtering in a draft. Courtiers whispered that the fool had lost his spark. The same phrase they used for a falcon that no longer stooped at prey, or a hound that no longer scented the boar. In a society where everything held worth only while it performed, decline itself was a breach of contract. Some rulers tried to postpone the inevitable by pairing an aging jester with a fresh apprentice. On parchment, this arrangement read like mentorship. In reality, it often felt like witnessing one's own obsolescence rehearsed in real time. The apprentice absorbed catchphrases, borrowed gags, even donned miniature replicas of the master's motley all, while courtiers compared the two with the detached cruelty of horse traders. A single banquet might feature the old fool wheezing through a familiar ditty, only to be upstaged moments later by his protégé's crisp parody of that very song. Every laugh for the novice became a subtraction from the mentor's dwindling ledger of relevance. The lucky few negotiated a graceful fade. Medieval chronicles mention a handful of veteran jesters who transitioned into unofficial tutor roles, teaching princes rhetoric under the guise of comedy, or advising chamberlains on the temperament of visiting envoys. Yet these exceptions highlighted the rule most courts lacked, either the imagination or the will to invest in a fool who could no longer ignite a room. More commonly, dismissal arrived wrapped in false courtesy. The steward might present the jester with a small pouch of coins in gratitude for years of service and a letter of safe conduct to seek new patrons. Such documents carried the court's seal, but not its protection. On the open road, highwaymen recognized royal wax as a sign the bearer once mingled with moneyed company and might still carry trinkets worth stealing. Thus began the fool's pilgrimage into oblivion. Without land trade or guild membership, he drifted from manor to market fare, hoping to parlay faded notoriety into supper. Some patched old routines into itinerant puppet shows, performing for pennies outside taverns. Others joined jugglers and bear baiters at seasonal fairs, their once silken bells now rust-flecked, their scepters traded for tin cups. Town children who had never seen a royal court still knew how to jeer, and each taunt dance cripple. Tell a joke echoed the commands that once thundered from velvet-draped balconies. Only now the stakes were starker failure meant an empty stomach rather than a night in the stocks. Yet hunger gnawed more persistently than any guard's baton. Winter proved fatal to many. The same nimble fingers that had unrolled bawdy scrolls for noble ladies stiffened in frost while begging at monastery gates. Monks offered crusts of bread and scripture in equal measure, urging repentance for a lifetime of mockery. Few jesters took comfort in promises of heavenly reward. After all, they had spent their earthly years exposing hypocrisy with laughter, not cloaking it in penance. Some, ironically, became wandering preachers themselves, seasoning sermons with comic flair, as though bargaining with God through the only currency they possessed, wit. Yet even divine audiences tired quickly, and the road stretched on. Death, when it came, rarely arrived amid friends. Parish burial registers recorded unknown vagrants found frozen in roadside ditches, occasionally noting the oddity of colored cloth or a tiny bell clutched in a bony fist. Canon law barred entertainers from consecrated graveyards unless a priest vouched for their piety. Few fools inspired such advocacy. Instead, they lay beneath unmarked earth at the edge of town, their names dissolved like ink left in the rain. The court chroniclers, who once immortalized their quips, simply omitted their endings as though a joke without applause deserved no footnote. And yet, in a twist as darkly comic as any jest, they spun oblivion sometimes proved reversible, at least for their material. A savvy successor might rifle through an elder fool's battered notebooks, adapt the best lines, and resurrect them before a new monarch who never suspected plagiarism. Thus, the dead jester's voice echoed in halls that had banished him, stripped of its original cadence, but still potent enough to conjure laughter. Influence survived, but ownership did not, underscoring the cruel economy that valued ideas only when detached from their creators. A few tales speak of revenge beyond the grave. In Prague, local legend holds that an exiled fool cursed a duke who denied him winter shelter, predicting the noble line would end when the bells fall silent in the tower. Years later, a lightning strike toppled the castle's bell tower during a family banquet, killing the heir apparent. The story's authenticity is dubious, but its endurance suggests communities hungered to believe the powerless could bend fate, even posthumously. Perhaps such legends offered catharsis, a small reparation for all the laughter purchased at the fool's expense. For those who survived long enough to reckon with their own legacy, reflection cut both ways. Some scribbled brittle diaries in which they weighed moments of fleeting power against decades of enforced jest. They wondered whether a jibe that saved a village from taxation justified the humiliation endured to deliver it, or whether the smile on a lonely queen's face balanced the nights he spent, shackled in the kennels for daring to satirize her wardrobe. These unpolished memoirs, when they surface in archives, read like confessions of reluctant prophets who glimpsed truth yet paid dearly for each revelation. And what of the courts that cast them out? In the short term, they filled the vacancy with younger, brighter motley. But history suggests that when rulers silence the messenger, whether by dismissal, imprisonment, or neglect, shadow replaces satire, and unchecked flattery metastasizes. Many a realm entered decline soon after losing its licensed fool, as though the absence of tolerated dissent corroded judgment itself. Chroniclers seldom draw the causal line explicitly, yet parchments sing in subtext where laughter died, so too did prudent governance. Thus, point 4 closes the arc. Begun with recruitment forged through performance and weaponized in critique, the jester's downfall illuminates the paradox at the heart of medieval power. It craved candor so desperately that it anointed a fool to supply it, then recoiled when that candor revealed too much. In point 5, we will leave the motley behind and pivot to the broader stage, tracing how ancient theatrical traditions, from dithyramb to drama, inherited both the spectacle and the peril of speaking truth in places of power, ensuring the fool's spirit would echo far beyond the castle walls. If point 4 left us on the frost-rimmed highway with a discarded fool trudging into obscurity, point 5 reaches further back, searching for the first fires that ever made people gather in a circle to watch someone else embody something larger than themselves. Long before court jesters dazzled monarchs or were exiled for failing to do so, performance was already ancient instinct. Born not in castles, but in moonlit clearings where farming clans and seaside traders needed communal stories to stitch their lives together. Picture an early spring evening in 6th century BCE Attica. Grain shoots poke through the red soil, and shepherds returning from Mount Parnitha find their path lit by torches that sway like distant fireflies. They follow the glow to a broad threshing floor just outside the village of Ikaria, where every household has sent at least one person. At the center, wine jars stand open their sharp fragrance, promising release from winter's gray grip. But this is no ordinary drinking bout. Tonight, the people dance for Dionysus, god of ripe grapes and unruly emotions, and their dancing is no casual jig. It is a dithyramb, a whirl of stamping feet and braided voices that hails the god's ecstatic arrival part, hymn part athletic spectacle. The first origin of theater lies in that circling chorus. 24 men, painted with wild berry juice ivy wreaths twined around their forearms, chant antiphonal lines that swell and recede like surf on a shingle beach. A drummer marks time with a hollow log, and a rustic flute winds between the singers until everyone's pulse drifts in synchrony. There is no stage, only sacred ground, demarcated by trampled grain husks. No written script, just a pattern remembered by the oldest throats and taught breath by breath to younger lungs. What matters is not perfection, but shared surrender. Each villager contributes their portion of laughter, grief, or longing too. The swirling sound, confident the group will catch it and echo it back. Yet even in this collective fervor, an ember of individuality flickers. At some point, no witness records exactly when one chorister, perhaps emboldened by strong wine or divine impulse, steps beyond the ring. Instead of repeating the refrain, he answers it. The moment startles everyone now. There is question and response protagonist, and chorus unfolding before night's cedar-scented hush. Tradition nicknames that first experimenter Thespis. Whether the name belonged to a single daring soul or many unnamed innovators, the leap is seismic. By breaking rank, the speaker invents dialogue, and with it, the possibility of drama. Word of the novelty travels the goat tracks to Athens. Their civic pride and religious fervor braid into something bigger. The city sponsors annual festivals, the rural Dionysia in winter, the Nāṭya just after midwinter, and the Great Dionysia in early spring, where villages parade into town, hauling sculpted falloway woven garlands and the best singers they can muster. Processions snake past the temples, goatskins slapping to the beat of cymbals. Children sprinkle barley grains. Magistrates solemnly pour libations before cheering along with the crowd. In this civic crucible, Dionysian worship evolves from rustic pageant to state-funded competition. Poets compose choral odes on papyrus scrolls, drill choruses on the Pnyx hillside, and hope the Archon will grant them a chorus subsidy, honor, prestige, and crucially resources. With public money comes structure. Builders quarry stone from Mount Hymettus and carve a semicircle into the south slope of the Acropolis. Terraced seating rows upon rows of limestone benches overlooks a dirt orchestra where choristers can dance without sliding down the incline. At the center stands an altar to Dionysus, reminder that the performance is an offering, not mere amusement. Above the orchestra rises a low wooden platform. Behind that platform, a rough shelter stores props and masks. The Greek word for that hut scheme will give modern languages the word scene. The impulse to codify has begun. Athenian law codes of the late 6th century record prizes for best dithyramb-listing poets, like Arion of Lesbos, whose compositions earned golden crowns or goatskins filled with wine. But the festival's appetite grows. Choruses now split by age, men's choruses sing of war and politics, boys' choruses of rebirth and budding courage. Judges, chosen by lottery to minimize corruption, mark tablets with a wax stylus and drop them into an urn where fate, or perhaps Dionysus's mischievous hand, decides final ranking. Victory inscribes a poet's name on steles beside generals and statesmen. Failure consigns months of practice to the quick forgetfulness of gossip. Out of that pressure cooker, another innovation emerges. Poets realize a single actor answering a chorus can portray only so much nuance. What if two actors converse while the chorus comments? The playwright Aeschylus, who will soon fight Persians at Marathon, introduces that second actor forging fully formed dialogue. Audiences gasp as characters debate destiny envy or hubris under the unforgiving sun. Painted linen masks amplify voices through crude mouthpieces, their stylized brows frozen in tragedy or glee. Color-coded robes signal royalty servitude or godhood. Suddenly, the threshing floor's informal spontaneity has crystallized into an art of illusion. Here is a king, racked by guilt there, a prophet blinded by foresight, all conjured from poet's ink and disciplined breath. The shift from collective chorus to multi-actor drama marks the moment performance stops being purely ritual and becomes storytellings of recognizable arcs. Plots now extend beyond a single festival day, grappling with inherited curses and civic duty themes that reflect Athenian anxieties as democracy begins to flex its fragile wings. Every citizen knows that decisions in the assembly can doom or redeem the polis. Similarly, a tragic hero's moral choice can topple kingdoms on the wooden stage. Theater becomes an intellectual gymnasium, where free men rehearse the ethics of power-testing arguments behind the safety of masks before voting in real life. While the city invests, individuals find livelihoods. Costume makers stitch patterned chitons. Bronze smiths hammer helmet crests. Mask artisans experiment with stiffened linen goat hair and pigments that glow in torchlight. An economy of imagination blossoms around the orchestra's dusty circle, echoing how medieval courts later built entire micro-industries around their jesters' motley. But unlike those solitary fools, Greek performers belong to a recognized civic institution. They may be satirized by comic poets, but they are rarely cast aside to starve when their voices fail. The city honors their service with festival stipends, and their names endure in marble. Still, this new art remembers its roots. Even as scripts grow complex, each play begins with a procession called the Isodos, a nod to the old chorus marching in from the fields. Between episodes, the chorus still chants strophe and antistrophe, preserving the original call and response pattern that birthed the genre. And always at center stage sits the altar to Dionysus, a quiet stone reminder that drama sprang from worship, just as the jester's satire once sprang from servitude to the crown. So, as point 4 showed a fool's mirror smashed by the very power it served. Point 5 reveals an alternate trajectory, how communal need-state sponsorship and daring individual leaps transformed ecstatic ritual into structured theater that could outlive any single performer. From dithyramb to dialogue, from threshing floor to limestone amphitheater, storytelling gained permanence and prestige, laying the groundwork for tragedies and comedies that would echo across empires. In point 6, we'll meet the giants who strode onto that freshly laid stage, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and watch them wield the newfound tools of character and plot to probe human fate with a clarity that still startles 2.5 millennia later. Point 5 left us watching ritual turn into drama on Athens' dusty orchestra. Point 6 strides onto that stage with the 3 playwrights who forged tragedy into the West's first literary supergenre, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. their voices rising from Dionysian sacrifice converted communal chant into laser-cut examinations of justice, pride, and pain. Where the medieval jester in Point 4 wielded wit to nudge kings, these poets used myth to interrogate the machinery of the polis. Picture dawn in 458 BCE. 10,000 Athenians crowd the limestone benches below the Acropolis cold mist, curling around the timely altar, while the herald demands silence. Up strides Aeschylus, veteran of Marathon, helmeted with laurels ready to debut the Oresteia. He has already shocked audiences by adding a second actor. Now he will end a blood-soaked myth with an innovation even bolder: a courtroom. When Athena transforms vengeance into legal trial, spectators feel democracy itself ratified before their eyes, a civic mirror far clearer than any jester's joke. 2 decades later, Sophocles' silver-voiced diplomat refines the form. He introduces a third actor, trims the chorus to 15, and polishes dialogue until it gleams like Attic pottery. Oedipus Rex unfolds with clockwork dread every question the king asks, chisels another letter into his doom, while the audience, armed with prior myth, watches tragedy bloom in slow motion. Antigone follows, pitting a teenage girl's burial rites against a tyrant's decree. In that clash, Athenians recognize their own wartime debates over loyalty and conscience, proving the stage can test policies before soldiers bleed for them. Enter Euripides' Enfant Terrible of 431 BCE. His Medea erupts the same year plague begins gnawing at Athens, and its raw language sounds like news from the streets. He writes women as strategists of fury slaves, as cynical commentators, gods as impersonal executives sweeping in by crane. Monologues replace some choral odes, everyday diction, undercuts heroic posturing, and psychological realism makes the orchestra feel claustrophobic. Audiences boo and crown him only 4 times, yet soldiers carry his verses to distant garrisons, proof that provocation can outmarch popularity. Across their combined corpus, the chorus evolves from protagonist of Point 5's dithyramb to reflective conscience. Aeschylus's elders of Argos panic like startled birds. Sophocles' Theban citizens plead for salvation. Euripides' bacchantes screech in ecstatic counterpoint. Music comes from the double-reed aulos, its piercing twin pipes weaving communal breath through individual heroics. Competitions remain fierce. Each playwright submits 3 tragedies and a satyr farce over 3 successive dawn-to-dusk marathons, and judges drawn by lot-inscribed verdicts that can make or break reputations with one wax-scored tablet. Behind the poetry lies meticulous craft. Linen masks coated with plaster display, exaggerated brows, and megaphone mouths, projecting emotion to the uppermost koilon seats. Actors stand on Cothurni wood-soled boots that elevate them a handspan, and cranes McCain hoist gods above smoking altars. Backstage carpenters build wheeled echiclema platforms to roll tableau corpses into view, avoiding blood on sacred ground. Victory monuments line the street of tripods, each bronze stand praising the Chorgos who bankrolled winning spectacles, public proof that generosity to art equals civic immortality. The impact outlives Athens' empire. Aristotle distills tragedy's anatomy, hamartia peripetia, anagnorisis catharsis, so later cultures can replicate its pulse the way jugglers once copied a court fool's best tricks. Touring guilds, the artists of Dionysus, negotiate passports and tax exemptions, performing canonical texts from Cyprus to Alexandria. Romans translate and twist these plays. Monks copy their scripts. Renaissance humanists resurrect them as templates for modern conscience. Unlike a discarded jester, the tragedies travel safely inside scrolls immune to aging lungs. Training for these spectacles began months in advance. Chorgoi hired drill masters to hammer out precise steps on beach sand, so dancers' feet would grip orchestra dust come festival day. Lyric coaches synchronized breath-teaching choristers to pivot from dactylic chants into sudden iambic bursts without losing tempo. The city paid each participant a daily wage, and apprentices gained civic stature alongside hoplites and rowers. To serve Dionysus in chorus was a rite of citizenship as vital as shield drill. Audiences, too, prepared. Households set aside coins for bench cushions and midday bread. Philosophers composed pamphlets predicting winners. Foreign envoys jostled for prime seats because an Athenian tragedy often doubled as policy telegram. When a play condemned hubris in imperial campaigns, allies heard warning. When a comic parabasis mocked inflation, merchants braced for new grain tariffs. Thus, theater functioned both as art and audible minutes of democratic conversation. Centuries later, when medieval universities rediscovered Aristotle, they saw in his Poetics the skeleton of arguments still staged by wandering minstrels and eventually the modern proscenium. The line from dithyramb to digital stream is long but unbroken. The ethical engine remains familiar, a safe space where unsafe truths erupt. Aeschylus challenges blood feud. Sophocles dissects autocracy. Euripides flays hypocrisy, all under state sponsorship. Just as a medieval fool once wielded satire before royalty tragedy, offers citizens catharsis that stabilizes society precisely by disturbing it. When injustice festers, the stage bleeds so the streets may not. That paradox order maintained through sanctioned disorder threads our whole series from jester to playwright. Night falls. Festival crowds stream home along torch-lit Panathenaic way, debating whether the gods are just or merely powerful. In their pockets are program leaves smeared with honey cake, in their minds a new vocabulary for doubt. Point 6. Thus completes Greek theater's ascent from communal chant to philosophical powerhouse, showing how three playwrights harnessed the raw ritual energy described in Point 5 and forged it into scripts robust enough to survive plague tyranny and time. In Point 7, we will cross the Adriatic to Rome, where satire grows broader spectacles bloodier, and the audience's appetite for astonishment outstrips even Dionysus's wildest dreams. Point 6 ended with Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides wielding myth like a scalpel against civic anxieties. Point 7 sails their legacy westward to the booming harbors of Republican and later imperial Rome, where Greek finesse collides with Latin swagger and entertainment swells into a public institution so colossal that it redefines the very meaning of spectacle. If Attic tragedy invited citizens to debate ethics under Dionysus's watchful gaze, Roman theater and its sprawling cousins, the circus and amphitheater, turned performance into a civic safety valve for a city whose appetite for diversion matched its hunger for conquest. Imagine the Forum in 240 BCE, when Livius Andronicus, a Greek freedman, stages Oducia, the first Latin adaptation of Homer. Temporary wooden bleachers creak under the weight of senators, plebeians, and slaves, all granted equal sightlines. A reminder that in Rome, entertainment is a tool to fuse diverse classes into a single thunder-voiced audience. The planks tremble whenever the crowd stamps approval, and soon the magistrates realize that subsidizing drama offers political returns. A satisfied populace shouts fewer complaints at the rostra. Annual Ludi Scenici stage games become fixtures alongside chariot races and gladiatorial bouts, each festival funded by ambitious aediles, eager to climb the cursus honorum with popular acclaim ringing in their ears. Where Greek playwrights probed metaphysical questions, Roman dramatists lean into vigorous humor and everyday intrigue. Plautus, writing in the early 2nd century BCE, stuffs his comedies with wordplay door-slamming farce, and sly social satire. Household slaves outwit masters, boastful soldiers, bungle love affairs, and misers clutch purses until punchlines pry them open, all delivered in rapid-fire colloquial Latin that audiences quote at taverns before the ink dries. Terence follows smoother and subtler, importing nuanced character arcs, yet even his refined dialogue reverberates with streetwise realism. Both playwrights champion stock types that will echo through Commedia dell'arte and Shakespeare, the scheming servant, the braggart, the star-crossed lovers, the irate father, whose threats never quite land. But theater is only one thread in Rome's entertainment tapestry. As the Republic strains under expansion, crowds swell beyond the limits of makeshift stages, and temporary wooden structures give way to marble playhouses. Pompey's stone theater in 55 BCE rivals any Greek amphitheater and attaches a lush portico garden, so senators can plausibly claim they came to stroll, not to watch frivolous shows. Moral scruples satisfied, politics preserved. Attendance is free underwritten by state or private largesse, underscoring an essential Roman calculation: bread plus spectacle equals social stability. Juvenal's famous panem et circenses will later skewer this formula, but for now, Rome embraces it as civic glue. Linked to public games, mime and pantomimus flourish. Mimes discard masks, letting actors emote freely while skewering local scandals. Pantomimes, conversely, adopt elaborate silk veils and dance entire myths to a solo flute, their silent gestures conveying passion more piercing than words. Star performers like Bathyllus and Pylades amass fan cults that rival charioteers, and Augustus erects moral regulations partly to curb the frenzy they inspire. Yet even emperors cannot resist the art's magnetism. Nero famously mounts the stage himself, crooning tragedies, while praetorians discreetly lock the exits so no one leaves before the curtain. Where the Greek chorus once mediated between gods and mortals, Rome's ruler now strides into the spotlight, fusing power and performance in ways a medieval jester could only envy. Alongside scripted drama, the appetite for visceral thrill explodes. Amphitheaters such as the Colosseum completed 80 CE host. Staged sea battles, exotic animal hunts, and executions that blur theater and capital punishment. Wooden sets collapse to reveal snarling leopards. Mythological tableaux culminate in real blood as condemned criminals reenact Icarus's fall, or Orpheus's dismemberment. Art and violence yoked for maximum awe. Seneca, composing tragedies for recitation rather than mass performance, mirrors this dark grandeur. His verses teem with gore revenge and philosophical dread, reflecting an empire that entertains itself by staring into the abyss. Yet Roman spectacles aren't pure escapism. They double as propaganda. Victorious generals fund lavish games to display spoils of war, parading chained captives before ecstatic crowds. Emperors announce tax remissions between acts, linking generous policy to immediate applause. Even satire serves statecraft. Horace's hexameters counsel moderation in politics, while Juvenal's savage lampoons expose corruption only to reaffirm Roman superiority over decadent foreigners. In this performative state, dissent is tolerated so long as it dissolves into cheers by nightfall, a dynamic foreshadowing how medieval courts used fools to vent pressures, then dismissed them at whim. Behind the curtain, an economy hums. Guilds of histriones negotiate contracts. Mask makers craft linen facades with hinged jaws. Choreographers drill troops in synchronized clacking of scabella, small wooden foot slippers, to keep rhythm. Freedmen manage touring companies that shuttle from provincial forums to frontier camps, spreading Roman values with every pun and drumbeat. Soldiers stationed in Gaul memorize Plautine jokes, then retell them in rustic Latin peppered with Celtic inflections comedy, becoming a lingua franca of empire. When Britannia's chilly forts echo with slapstick routines about greedy merchants, we glimpse the same mechanism that carried Greek tragedy abroad performance as cultural adhesive. Over time, though, spectacle's escalating scale exposes fissures. Ticket subsides strain the treasury. Rival factions of chariot fans riot burning neighborhoods in the Nika Revolt of 532 CE. Christian writers denounce theaters as dens of vice. Bishops close playhouses during Lent, yet ironically borrow stage techniques, incense chant procession to enrich liturgy. As the Western Empire totters, curtains close more often than they rise. Theatrical troupes disperse, morphing into wandering storytellers and shadow puppeteers that will later resurface in medieval marketplaces. Thus, like our discarded jester from Point 4, Roman performance fades from marble halls into cart-packed roads, carrying fragments of grandeur into the patchwork kingdoms that follow. Still, its imprint endures. Roman arches and vomitoria shape modern stadiums. Plautine archetypes populate sitcoms. Senecan rhetoric fuels Renaissance revenge tragedy. Most crucially, the Roman model proves that state-funded entertainment can pacify or provoke uplift or brutalize. Depending on who scripts the show, a lesson every subsequent ruler from Byzantine emperors to contemporary governments will study with both admiration and dread. Point 7. Then charts how the disciplined introspection of Greek tragedy. Point 6 swelled into Rome's multi-ring circus of laughter lyric and lethal spectacle, an evolution that magnified performance's capacity to influence masses, yet tethered it ever tighter to political power. In Point 8, we'll voyage eastward along the Silk Road to India, where the Nāṭya Śāstra codifies Rasa, and to China, where masked dancers at the Tang court and Yuanzhaju playwrights craft dramas as intricate as any carved jade, proving that the hunger to see ourselves, comic, tragic, divine, transcends borders and empires alike. Point 7 led us out of the marble arcades of Rome, where applause could drown even a lion's roar. Point 8 turned southeast, following caravans of cinnamon and lapis across the Hindu Kush to a land where thunderous drums, not trumpets, announce the gods. Here sometime between 200 BCE and 200 CE, anonymous sages gather centuries of ritual dance storytelling and Vedic chant into the world's first comprehensive treatise on performance, the Nāṭya Śāstra. If Roman games welded art to empire, this Sanskrit scripture of theater forges art into a cosmic mandala, declaring that drama is nothing less than a fifth Veda, accessible to women outcasts, and even the very animals whose stories populate its myths. Open its palm leaf pages, and you find a blueprint as precise as a fortress plan. There are chapters on stage architecture, rectangular vikursta square, chaturasra, and triangular triashra designs, each calibrated so. Actors' voices ride wooden resonators beneath the planks and reach the furthest bamboo bench. There are rules for makeup colors, green for gallantry, white for holiness, black for demonic rage. There is abhinaya, the grammar of expression dividing performance into 4 channels: angika body, vachika speech, aharya costume, and sattvika, the trembling truth of inner emotion. Most revolutionary is the theory of rasa, literally flavor, which insists that the purpose of art is to brew 8 basic bhavas. Emotional seeds into a palate-defining taste: wonder, terror, pathos, eroticism, comic relief, fury, disgust, and heroic ardor. Where Roman crowds demanded bread and blood, Indian audiences seek that palate shock of rasa, a catharsis not of politics, but of the soul's chemistry. Picture dusk at the court of Ujjain in the 4th century Gupta twilight, peacocks settling in neem trees, while torches hiss against the jasmine-heavy air. court poet Kalidasa, draped in indigo silk, unrolls a fresh birch bark scroll and clears his throat. Tonight he premieres Abhijnana Shakuntalam, the recognition of Shakuntala, a tale of love curse and reunion that will sail to Goethe's desk some 15 centuries later. The stage is minimal, a painted cloth grove, a half-moon white pebble stream. But when the heroine drops her ring, the collective breath of the court catches. Rasa ripples outward like a stone cast into a lotus pond. First Shrangara, erotic sweetness, then Karuna, plaintive sorrow, finally Adbhuta marvel, as the lovers reunite under heavenly sanction. Where Greek tragedy teaches duty through loss, this Sanskrit romance teaches cosmic balance through longing and forgiveness, and its emotional calculus is so potent that Chinese pilgrims will carry manuscripts over the Silk Road to Dunhuang's caves. Yet scripted Sanskrit drama flourishes mainly in royal or temple precincts, recited by high-caste actors whose stylized gestures can signify a hurricane with a single spinning wrist. What about the village square, where farmers crave flesh and blood spectacle? Enter the folk forms, Kathakali in Kerala, Yakshagana in Karnataka, and countless masked dances riding monsoon, winds up the coast. Kathakali erupts after dusk torches, illuminating green-painted demons and red-bearded warriors as drums called chenda hammer, 8 beats a second. Performers train for 12 years, learning to isolate eyebrow muscles, so one arch alone can signal treachery. Lyrics are sung off stage in archaic Malayalam, freeing the dancer to communicate solely by mudra and eye roll. Audience members decode a symphony of finger knots that would bewilder a Roman mime, yet feels instantly legible to a coconut seller who has never held a book. Travel north, and the air rings with the metallic Madale drum of Yakshagana. Performances stretch from twilight to sunrise, children napping beneath mango carts, while heroes duel astride papier-mâché horses. Troops tour rice paddy hamlets the way Roman histriones once worked legion camps, but their currency is mythic continuity rather than imperial propaganda. These folk epics retell the Mahabharata and Ramayana in hyper-local dialects, adding jokes about the village tax assessor or sly praise for the host family's idly. Thus, like the medieval fool who smuggled court gossip into fables folk performers' seed. Current anxieties inside sacred saga, ensuring every laugh carries a pulse of living relevance. Behind both classical and folk stages stands an ecosystem as complex as Rome's, though spiritually oriented. Sculptors carve wooden masks seasoned in neem oil. Textile dyers ferment turmeric and indigo to match chromatic codes in the Nāṭya Śāstra. Temple bronze casters fund troops in thanks for good harvests. Even training carries ritual weight. Kathakali students massage their faces with sesame oil at dawn, strengthening cheek muscles as an act of devotion. Unlike gladiators who fight under threat of death, Indian performers risk social degradation if they mishandle a mudra invoking Lakshmi or mispronounce a mantra mid-song. The stakes are karmic. Performance also becomes diplomacy. When Chola envoys sail to Angkor, they gift Khmer kings not only bronze Nataraja statues, but Bharatanatyam teachers whose footwork will echo in Cambodian court dance for centuries. The art thus functions as soft power diffusing Indian cosmology across Southeast Asia without a single legion stepping ashore, a peaceful corollary to Rome's arena thunder. Yet the maturity of Sanskrit theater primes it for fragility. As northern courts fragment under Huna invasions and later Islamic sultanates' patronage dwindles, manuscripts disappear into monsoon-damp monasteries. Actors migrate to safer, smaller courts or reinvent themselves as storytellers at temple festivals. In some regions, like coastal Kerala, Brahmin decrees exile performers from sanctums, entirely pushing Kathakali onto public grounds where ticketed seats replace royal stipends. Paradoxically, this marginalization infuses folk troupes with new grit, just as a jester banished from castle comfort once turned roadside adversity into sharper satire. Meanwhile, devotional bhakti movements democratize spirituality through song and dance. Poet saints such as Tulsidas compose vernacular epics designed for mass recitation, dissolving Sanskrit exclusivity. Ramlila pageants spring up in North India, staging 10-day cycles where villagers interchange roles nightly, far removed from Rome's marble, but sharing its communal fervor. The idea that art unites disparate castes echoes the Colosseum's leveling bleachers. Yet here, the glue is shared divinity rather than state largesse. Throughout these transitions, the Rasa doctrine endures. Mughal courtiers adapt it to Persian ghazal aesthetics. Colonial-era playwrights from Rabindranath Tagore to Girish Karnad invoke it to frame national identity inside modern prosceniums. Even Bollywood in its kaleidoscope musicals balances romance pathos and spectacle according to Rasa equations codified 2 millennia earlier. Where Roman arches survive in football stadiums, Rasa survives in a teardrop cued by a violin swell at exactly the 30-second mark of a Hindi film's first love duet. Thus, Point 8 maps a theatrical universe where spectacle answers to philosophy. If Rome used grandeur to distract and govern, classical India employs aesthetics to align human emotion with cosmic order. The stage becomes a laboratory, not for political might, but for spiritual equilibrium, proving yet again that performance mutates to match the worldview that feeds it. In Point 9, we will veer northeast to China, where masked exorcists of the Tang court evolve into the melodic precision of Zaju, and eventually the kaleidoscopic pageantry of Peking opera. Another testament that the hunger to dramatize existence is as boundless as the trade winds that once carried silk scripture and song across continents. Point 8 ended with peacock green Kathakali masks shimmering in monsoon torchlight. Point 9 follows the monsoon winds farther northeast across bamboo seas and yellow rivers to a civilization that spun performance into a silk thread binding court ritual, village festival, and imperial politics alike. China's theatrical journey begins not with playwrights, but with shamans Nuo masked exorcists of the late Zhou era, who stamped in rhythmic circles to chase plague demons from mud-walled hamlets. Their wooden visages, fanged tigers, scowling generals, crimson maidens, prefigured the face-painting codes that would later bloom into full operatic syntax. Where India's Nāṭya Śāstra fused art with cosmic rasa. Early Chinese drama fused art with cosmological order, each dance step echoing yin-yang balance and 5 elements harmony. By the Tang Dynasty, 618–907 CE, these ritual seeds had sprouted into luxuriant court entertainments. Emperor Xuanzong, nicknamed the Brilliant Monarch, founded the Pear Garden Academy within Chang'an's vermilion walls, training singer-dancers in tight choreography, accompanied by pipa and bamboo flutes. Graduation meant a sprig of pear blossom tucked behind the ear, hence later actors calling themselves children of the Pear Garden. Tang pageants mixed Central Asian acrobatics with native storytelling, mirroring the Silk Road's cultural traffic. Yet even amid gold brocade and jade hairpins, ghosts of the shamanic past lingered shadow puppet troupes, projected silk silhouettes against palace lanterns, reenacting Buddhist parables that doubled as exorcisms of ignorance. Political turbulence in the Song era, 960–1270, pushed performance outward from palace to tea house. Urban capitals like Kaifeng birthed Zaju Miscellany, shows splicing skits, juggling, and ballad singing between marketplace hawkers and fortune tellers. Role categories crystallized. Sheng male leads, Dan female leads often played by men Jing, painted face warriors, and Cho clown. The last inheriting the Jesters' license to lampoon officials without losing his head. Merchant guilds sponsored playhouses, tickets cost a copper coin, and scripts sold like chapbooks, marking China's first mass commercial theater. Lyrics printed with movable type presses centuries before. Gutenberg traveled in traders' satchels to Korea, Japan, and the archipelagos beyond. The Mongol-run Yuan dynasty, 1271–1368, transformed Zaju into literary artillery. Scholar playwrights barred from civil service exams by ethnic quotas funneled frustration into scathing scripts. Guan Hanking's Injustice to Dui condemns corrupt magistrates through a widow's wrongful execution and a blood snow miracle, while Wang Shifu's romance of the Western Chamber champions. Private love over arranged duty, an audacity that made censors sputter, yet audiences weep. Each Yuan play used 4 song cycles allocating arias to a single protagonist per act, creating a focus as intense as Greek strophe and antistrophe. Painted-face clowns slipped political barbs between fart jokes, proving the medieval fool's spirit had found a new bamboo stage. With the Ming Renaissance 1368 to 1644 came kunku, an art of perfumed subtlety. Water-sleeve dancers floated across boards dusted in crushed sandalwood, their voices gliding through melismatic lines set by composer Gu Jian. Literati patrons treating theater as ink washes in motion demanded poetic finesse. A single wrist flick could suggest falling plum blossoms, a breathy portamento, the ache of unconsummated love. Tang Xianzu's Peony Pavilion stretched desire over 55 scenes, declaring, "In dreams alone do I meet thee," and audiences swooned for centuries. Yet even refined kunko retained a moral undertow aligning romance with Taoist cosmology, where melding souls nourished universal qi. Then, under Qing rule, 1644–1912, regional genres collided in Beijing's bustling fairgrounds to birth Jingju, known worldwide as Peking opera. Anhui troops brought piercing, high-pitched melodies. Hubei artists contributed rhythmic gongs. Manchu princes supplied patronage. Soon lacquered stages flickered with embroidered dragons and flags. Color-coded face paint crystallized semiotics: crimson for loyalty, white for treachery, gold for deity. A stylized trot signified a 1,000-mile ride. 2 crossed whips evoked raging rivers, and a single white silk strip twirled overhead conjured snowfall fiercer than any Roman arena tableau. Like Rome's Colosseum, Jingju became both entertainment and national mirror only. Here catharsis arrived through disciplined minimalism rather than spectacle's excess. Performance never stood apart from power. When Empress Dowager Cixi commandeered the Summer Palace stage, actors reoriented blocking to face her gilded viewing box, literalizing how art must bow before authority. Yet the stage also seeded revolution. Late Qing reformists held clandestine meetings backstage, smuggling pamphlets inside prop boxes. After 1949, the communist state reforged opera into ideological forge commissioning model works, where peasant heroines wield rifles and arias, extol agrarian collectivism. Jiang Qingmao's wife rehearsed actors at gunpoint to perfect proletarian fervor. Despite rigid dogma, the ancient role system persisted beneath new uniforms, proving tradition's resilience. Once politics relaxed, classic repertoires resurfaced like lotus shoots after flood. Technically, Chinese theater always married art to athleticism. Students entered training at age 8, balancing porcelain bowls on heads while executing backflips or reciting tongue twisters while suspended upside down to strengthen diaphragms. Such rigors echo Kathakali's 12-year apprenticeship, and distantly, the Pear Garden discipline of Tang times, forming an unbroken chain of embodied knowledge. Craft guilds carved bamboo flutes scaled to pentatonic tuning. Face paint recipes blended rice paste with mineral pigments that matched feng shui color theory. Seamstresses stitched water ink gradients into silk so sleeves mimicked mountain mist. Every artisan partook of performance karma, their handiwork spinning qi across centuries. Yet despite imperial might, popular roadside troops remained vital. Rural Shehuo festivals unfolded each Lunar New Year villagers, clad as drum tower gods, paraded stilt walkers and lion dancers to exorcise hunger spirits, an echo of Nuo's demon-banishing roots. In Sichuan, tea houses quick-change artists flicked capes to swap masks faster than thought their sorcery, prompting gasps louder than any Yuan scholar's couplet. Even television's arrival in the 1980s could not stifle these grassroots stages. Instead, CCTV's Spring Gala beamed them into millions of apartments, turning local idioms into national nostalgia. Thus, Point 9 shows China forging a theatrical grammar where cosmology commerce and critique cohabited beneath lacquered roof beams. From Nuo's shamanic stomps to Jingju's crimson phoenix masks, each era layered new pigment atop old wood, never fully erasing what lay beneath. If India's Rasa theory flavored emotion and Rome's arenas fed civic appetite, China's drama sought harmony between heaven and earth ruler and subject body and breath. In Point 10, we will cross the Sea of Japan to a volcanic archipelago where Zen austerity distills performance even further. No whispers, Bunraku breathes through wooden puppets, and kabuki erupts in painted thunder. A triad proving that the human urge to frame reality in art can shrink to a monk's footstep or explode into a fireworks of drums, yet always circles back to the same glowing hearth of story. Point 9 left us beneath Beijing's painted eaves, where crimson masks crystallized harmony. Point 10 rides the trade winds east across the Sea of Japan, where Chinese court ritual, Korean court dance, and indigenous shamanism converge on an archipelago that will distill performance into three distinct yet interwoven arts: no Bunraku and kabuki. Each form inherits the cosmological precision of China's pear garden disciples, yet adapts it to a landscape of misty cedars, volcanic soil, and Zen monasteries, where silence thunders louder than gongs. Together, they chart a 1,000-year quest to balance austerity and excess stillness and spectacle, proving that the universal hunger for embodied story can whisper as powerfully as it roars. We begin in the 14th century at the shrine precincts of Kasuga and Kofukuji in Nara, where a father-son duo named Kanami and Ziami refined sarugaku, rough clowning, and acrobatics imported from Tang China into the transcendent art of No. Imagine a moonlit stage roofed like a Shinto shrine, cypress boards, polished to mirror finish the only set piece, a single pine painted on the rear wall to signify the eternal present. An actor in a plain silk robe steps forward, wearing a mask carved so delicately that a candle's flicker can shift its expression from grief to ecstasy. Flutes and shoulder drums usher in an austere chant, the timbre equal parts lullaby and sutra. Lines unfold in an archaic diction older than the samurai who sponsor the show. Movements are measured in millimeters, calibrated to Zen principles of Yugen, the mysterious depth suggested never shown, where Chinese Jingju dazzles with bright pigment. No erases color until the audience must project its own hues onto the lacquered void, achieving emotional resonance through disciplined subtraction. Zimi writes treatises that echo India's Rasa theory, but frame it within Japanese aesthetics. He calls the ideal performer Hana, the elusive flower that blooms only when technique merges with soul. Training as lifelong actors learn to walk with knees bent, just enough that a sleeve's edge skims the floor, to pause until silence thickens like incense, and to release a single syllable that ripples across the darkness. Samurai warlords attend not for distraction, but self-reflection. A ghost begging for enlightenment mirrors the warrior's own karmic weight. In this way, No becomes both meditation and political theater, reinforcing the shogunate's ethos of restraint, even as it dramatizes the restless spirits left by endless civil wars. Fast forward 3 centuries to Osaka's bustling Dotonbori district, where merchants flush with rice tax profits crave livelier fare than No's ethereal ghosts. Enter Bunraku, the puppet theater that elevates wood and fabric into heartbreaking verisimilitude. 3 black-robed puppeteers animate a single doll. The chief manipulates head and right arm, an assistant controls left arm, and a junior crouches at the feet to guide footsteps so precise they can reveal hesitation in love or resolve in suicide. Stage left, a chanter called the Tayu performs every character's voice, sliding from coquettish whisper to Ronin roar, without breaking breath, while a shamisen player saws rhythms that cue sword clashes or tears. The playwright Chikamatsu Munzaemon often dubbed the Japanese Shakespeare pen's tragedies, where duty and passion collide. Lovers, tethered by rigid class codes, choose double suicide at Sonezaki, a samurai nursefish between fealty and child's life. Audiences sob because the puppets paradoxically expose human fragility more nakedly than live actors could. Their carved faces, incapable of spontaneous twitch, become mirrors for spectators' projected sorrow. Bunraku's technical rigor parallels Roman engineering, and Chinese face paint lore headcarvers spend decades mastering eyelid mechanisms that flutter like startled sparrows. Costumiers stitch silk miniature kimonos each dye, signaling clan or mood in a chromatic lexicon. Yet beneath the craft pulses economic pragmatism. Osaka's rising chonin class funds theaters through ticket subscriptions, transforming performance into commodity and civic pride. Where No served warrior contemplations, Bunraku speaks merchant pragmatics, its tragedies warning that breaking society's ledger of obligations courts ruin sentiments any rice broker understands. But the Edo period, 1603–1868, is nothing if not centrifugal. Alongside No's hush and Bunraku's precision erupts Kabuki, the firework born when shrine dancer Izumo no Okuni parades onto Kyoto's dry Kamo riverbed in men's swordplay garb, gyrating to drumbeats that scandalize monks and mesmerize fishermen. Authorities attempt to ban her all-female troupe for inciting moral laxity. Regulations oscillate first, substituting handsome adolescent boys, wakashu, then mature male actors, yaro kabuki, who master onagata female roles after authorities outlaw women on stage. The result is a genre that thrives on transformation gender class. Even reality itself slip like silk under kabuki's revolving stages and trapdoor lifts. Step into Edo's Nakamuraza in 1780. Lanterns paint the audience crimson. Vendors hawk pickled ginger. Fans flutter like butterfly wings in summer heat. With a thundercrack of wooden clappers, a samurai villain in Kumadori face paint storms down the Hanamichi runway, eyes glaring crimson lines against chalk-white skin, his roar amplified by the crowd's shout of kakego cheers. Stagehands in black kuroko. Whisk props on and off with invisibility rituals borrowed from Zen thieves. A hydraulic platform rotates an entire farmhouse set to reveal tidal flats, sparkling with mica flakes. Kabuki digests influences from No stylized mai poses. Freeze combat into sculptural tableau Bunraku. Popular scripts like Kana Dehon Choshingura migrate from puppet to flesh, and Chinese Jingju acrobatics seen in Nagasaki's trade quarter. Yet it synthesizes them into populist dynamite, fulfilling the same civic valve that Roman circuses once served, minus the bloodshed. but with equal sensory overload. The Tokugawa shogunate monitors kabuki's pandemonium with wary eyes, issuing sumptuary laws restricting costume luxury, but actors parody these edicts through even bolder abstractions, substituting crimson spiderweb patterns for band gold thread or exaggerating wig height beyond gravity's mercy. Thus, kabuki becomes a barometer of censorship's cat and mouse, its flamboyance a coded rebuke to authority echoing China's Cho clown, who slipped barbs beneath slapstick, and Rome's satirists, who stretched imperial forbearance. When Western black ships arrive in 1853, kabuki swiftly absorbs steam trains and rifles into stage tricks, mirroring national anxieties with chameleonic speed. Meanwhile, no endures in daimyo estates. Its minimalist pine stage, now a time capsule of bygone feudal values, and Bunraku struggles against kabuki's star power until government subsidies in the 20th century safeguard puppet troupes as cultural heritage. World wars scorch cities, but not memory. Post-war playwrights like Mishima Yukio adapt no plots with existential ennui, and filmmakers from Mizoguchi to Kurosawa borrow kabuki framing for cinematic choreography. Today, tourists in Ginza buy headset translations as living national treasures, glide through No's 600-year-old chant, while across town, neon marquees advertise kabuki reviews with LED waterfalls. The continuum proves resilient. From shamanic stomp to digital surround sound, the Japanese stage still balances precision and play old masks and new avatars. Thus, Point 10 completes our eastward odyssey by revealing how Japan harvested continental seeds to cultivate a triptych of performance arts, each rooted in ritual, yet flowering into distinctive aesthetics that reflect shifting social orders. Where China sought harmony between cosmos and court Japan, oscillates between Zen stillness and urban frenzy, offering a dramaturgical spectrum as wide as Mount Fuji's shadow. In our concluding Point 11, we will sail back toward the Mediterranean to witness how these Asian echoes reverberated through modern Western theater, from commedia masks to avant-garde minimalism, proving that every stage, whether pine board or LED panel, stands on the shoulders of masked ancestors who once danced to summon rain-banished demons or simply coax a weary crowd into one more gasp of wonder. Point 10 left us in Tokyo's neon dusk, where kabuki's crimson thunder still echoes across Pinewood No stages. Point 11 turns the compass westward once more, charting the great circular migration of theatrical ideas that began in antiquity, gathered new colors in Asia, and finally washed back onto European shores like a tide, returning home richer with every strange current it met. The result is modern theater, a mosaic of masks, footlights, and philosophies whose pieces originate in Greek choruses, Roman arenas, Sanskrit rasas, Chinese pear blossoms, and Japanese yugen. To trace this lineage is to watch the past century's stages flicker like a lantern stacked with acetate slides, each layer transparent enough to let older shadows shine through, yet bold enough to project new shapes onto the audience's hearts. The first ripple appears in 16th century Italy, where commedia dell'arte troupes wander market squares wearing half masks that echo both Roman mimes and Japanese onagata transformations. Harlequin's acrobatic lazi borrow clowning energy familiar to China's chow roll, while Pantalone's leathery visage recalls the stock types Plautus once paraded before the Forum. Yet comedia's improvisatory spirit also anticipates kabuki's kakego, a dialogue with spectators that blurs boundary between seat and stage, forging the modern notion of breaking the fourth wall. English players carry these masks across the channel, seasoning Elizabethan drama so that Shakespeare's Fool can pivot from rustic farce to metaphysical insight in the span of a soliloquy, an inheritance from the medieval jester's razor tongue and the Yuan Zaju clown's coded descent. By the 19th century, Europe has rediscovered Greek ideals through neoclassicism, but Romanticism rebels, craving exotic vistas. Translations of Kalidasa and Tangxianzu inspire lyrical experiments. Wagner coins Gesamtkunstwerk, a total artwork that synthesizes music, poetry, and design, much as Kathakali merges drum dance and narrative into a single tidal wave of rasa. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution invents gaslight footlights, letting directors sculpt shadow with the same precision no actors command through stillness. The stage becomes both laboratory and battleground. Naturalists like Zola demand raw social truth, while symbolists chase the dreamlike aura of a no-ghost drifting across moonlit cypress boards. The 20th century detonates old forms into avant-garde fragments. In Ireland, W.B. Yeats reads Fenollosa's translations of No and writes, "At the Hawkswell condensing myth into spare ritual where masked dancers and pounding drums evoke Shinto austerity." Gordon Craig, mesmerized by Bunraku's hidden puppeteers, imagines the uber marionette, an actor schooled to move with puppet-like precision, free from ego, anticipating Jerzy Grotowski's poor theater discipline, and Suzuki Tadashi's stomping kata that fuse kabuki footwork with Greek chorus weight. Antonin Artaud, after watching a Balinese dance, deeply indebted to Indian Abhinaya pens, the theater, and its double urging Western stages to reclaim the visceral magic of plague masks and sacred chanting. His theater of cruelty echoes Roman blood spectacle minus real death channeling, instead psychological exorcism akin to China's Nuo origins. Between world wars, German director Max Reinhardt erects amphitheater-sized spectacles that blend Athenian scale with Peking opera color palettes, while Brecht exiled and reflective studies Chinese acting manuals and shapes his alienation effect. Deliberate reminders of theatrical artifice on the model of Jingju performers who present character and comment on it simultaneously. Brecht's epic theater teaches audiences to think, not just feel, echoing how Greek tragedy once doubled as civic debate, and Yuan playwrights laced rhetoric with social critique. Across the Atlantic, Eugene O'Neill introduces maskwork, inspired by both No and Commedia, into The Great God Brown, and later American experimentalists like Robert Wilson stretch time into no-like slowness, while bathing actors in kabuki-style shafts of saturated color. Post-war prosperity spawns commercial mega-musicals, yet even Broadway's glitz reveals Asian fingerprints. The Lion King adapts Bunraku's triple operator puppetry for its gazelle rigs. Pacific overtures structures songs around pentatonic motifs evocative of Gagaku court music. Miss Saigon stages tableau fade-outs reminiscent of kabuki siri lifts. Meanwhile, downtown black box spaces host Buto Hijikata Tatsumi's grotesque dance of darkness, born from Hiroshima's shadow, that weds Zen minimalism to expressionist angst, offering Western bodies a new dialect of silence and convulsion. Academies codify this cross-pollination. Acting students practice Stanislavski's emotional memory in the morning, Suzuki stomps at noon, and Viewpoint's spatial compositions, a theory Mary Overly built upon No's Ma, the sacred interval, by dusk. Designers study Cantonese opera chromatics to craft LED projections. Dramaturgs trace tropes from Chikamatsu to Tennessee Williams. Digital theater extends the circle further. Motion capture actors wear sensor suits, translating Bunraku's precision into CGI avatars, while VR storytellers embed users at the chorus's center, fulfilling a promise first felt on an Attic hillside 2.5 millennia ago. Through all these reinventions, three ancient motives persist: catharsis, communion, and critique. Audiences still gather to purge feeling, just as Greeks sought catharsis through pity and terror, and Indians tasted Rasa's flavor burst. They still crave collective heartbeat, whether in kabuki's synchronized cheers or a rock musical's standing ovation. And they still demand the mirror of truth, Shakespeare's jesters, Brecht's narrators, Beijing's clowns, and Broadway's anti-heroes each expose hypocrisy while offering laughter as shield and scalpel. The mediums evolve. LEDs replace whale oil lamps, live streams outpace caravan troops, but the engine remains that primal triangle of storyteller-listener and shared breath. Our journey began with a medieval fool bullied into eternal punchlines and wins through every continent's answer to the same human itch to frame existence. Laugh at it, grieve for it, and maybe alter it. If No teaches beauty in disciplined restraint, kabuki flaunts liberation through extreme color. If Roman arenas warned of power's hunger, Sanskrit stagecraft showed emotion's alchemy. If Peking opera sought cosmic balance, Greek tragedy mapped moral consequence. Modern theater standing on this pyramid of past is less a single tower than a bustling port, where ships from every era dock at sunset, unloading masks, melodies, and movement vocabularies to be repackaged for the next voyage. Yet the circle still spins. Contemporary playwrights like Ayat Akhtar weave Sanskrit-like prose cadences into immigrant narratives. Immersive companies such as Punchdrunk steal Nuo's labyrinthine ritual to let audiences wander ghost-haunted warehouses. Artificial intelligence playwrights generate scripts, then hand them to directors who borrow Zimi's Hana to teach code how to bloom on stage. Even in digital clouds, the echo of drums from Kaifeng tea houses and Osaka puppet pits remains audible, insisting that technological leaps do not sever roots, but rather fertilize them. Thus, Point 11 completes the arc begun when dithyrambs summoned Dionysus and jesters juggled before uneasy kings. We arrive at a 21st century theater that is simultaneously global and local, ancient and newborn, a hall of mirrors reflecting every culture's attempt to translate the unsayable through body, sound, and light. The ghost on a no bridge, the puppet's porcelain tear, the kabuki hero frozen in midair. They all stand behind today's actors as silent ancestors, reminding us that whenever house lights dim, we join an unbroken lineage, seeking in the charged hush before the first line the same flicker of collective wonder that once rose like torch smoke over a Greek hillside at dawn. Where Point 11 traced how ancestral masks still haunt the modern stage. Point 12 steps off the boards and into the rough-hewn corridors of Pella's royal nursery, where the drama of empire unfolded not under footlights, but beneath the clang of practice swords. Here, decades before, playwrights would immortalize her as the Iron Rose of Macedon Princess Senain, firstborn of King Philip II, and the Illyrian queen consort, Odata, learned that in a kingdom ruled by spears, the cradle itself could be a proving ground. Senain's earliest memory recorded by her tutor in brittle Attic Greek was not a lullaby, but the metallic taste of the forge. At 3, she toddled after her mother through the armory, mesmerized by crimson-hot billets hammered into arrowheads. While other children chased marble toys, she chased sparks, giggling when they stung her bare shins. Odata allowed it, for the queen steel was scripture, and she believed the gods granted no sharper catechism than discipline under fire. Court gossips whispered that exposure to such ferocity would warp the girl's nature. Instead, it tempered her beneath the skin, infusing a resolve that would later outshine any polished cuirass. By 6, when Athenian children recited Hesiod, Senain recited infantry drill calls. Each dawn, she greeted the courtyard like an arena braids, bound tight rawhide sandals, strapped wooden xiphos, strapped to a belt cut down from her mother's war girdle. Her companions were not nursemaids, but pages' boys, 2 years older, who soon discovered she struck harder, learned faster, and fell less often. The drill master, an old Theban mercenary named Echecrates, swore he saw her block an overhead blow and pivot into a textbook shield bash before she could properly write her own name. He added an extra hour to the page's regimen, growling that no prince of Macedon would lag behind a girl with lightning in her eyes. Thus, rivalry became her alphabet, respect her first verb. Literacy arrived through another kind of duel. Philip, away on Thracian campaigns, sent Aristotle's scrolls as birthday gifts. Political treatises meant for a future son, not the daughter the gods had given him first. Odata unrolled the parchment before the hearth one stormy evening and challenged Senain to decode the looping Ionian hand. The child pored over unfamiliar symbols until candle wax pooled on the floor. When at last she spoke, the first sentence aloud, stumbling but unbroken, her mother nodded once and said, "Good. Words are weapons, too." From then on, sword practice ended only when she could recite a passage on governance without mispronunciation. Muscles and mind grew braided inseparable. The palace, however, was no monastic cloister. Politics seeped through door cracks like winter drafts. Senain overheard stewards fretting over Illyrian hostages, ambassadors bargaining for trade in silver ore eunuchs, gossiping about her father's newest Macedonian bride. She stored each fragment like a pebble in a sling pouch, intuition telling her that one day she would need ammunition not of iron, but of insight. When Philip finally returned, bearing an infant half-brother who would be known to history as Alexander Senain, studied the baby's swaddled face and silently ranked him among her daily opponents. Sisters might cradle, warriors assess. Philip's reaction to his daughter's prowess veered between pride and unease. Pride because Macedon prized strength above all, and the child displayed it in abundance. Unease because tradition reserved the phalanx for sons leaving daughters to spindle and hearth. To placate that tension, he organized a private contest on Senain's 10th birthday archery, at 20 paces, wrestling to first pin, and a chariot sprint around the lower training ring. Courtiers bet heavily on the crown prince's 12-year-old nephew, a gangly boy named Demetrius. Senain felled the bullseye, flipped Demetrius with a heel sweep learned from Illyrian grapplers, and steered the chariot so close to the judge's dais that its wheel brushed Philip's boot. The king roared laughter loud enough to rattle the shield racks, then declared he'd award no daughter like livestock. He would instead grant her a command of 50 light cavalry when she reached 16. The banquet that night brimmed with uneasy toasts, older generals masking alarm beneath wine-stained smiles. Even victories carried scars. That same year, a disgruntled court faction slipped laudanum into her training partner's wine, hoping to tarnish the girl's aura through association. The boy collapsed during drills. Senain cradled his convulsing body, while physicians fumbled with horncups and pungent herbs. He lived, but his trust in the palace did not. Senain learned 2 lessons. First, that weakness exploited the undefended heart. Second, that poison often disguised itself as power's shadow. She doubled her study of medicinal botany knowledge that would later save her life on campaign, and began tasting a drop of wine from every shared goblet before any comrade drank. Iron discipline hardened into protective ritual, admired by friends and dreaded by foes who saw their plots reflected in her mirror-bright vigilance. Into adolescence, her reputation spread beyond Macedon's borders. Traders from Ionia spoke of a copper-haired girl who could split a fig on a lance point at full gallop. Thracian envoys, nursing bruised egos from diplomatic arm twists, called her the lioness cub. Her half-brother Alexander, returning from tutoring sessions with Aristotle, challenged her to a running debate on Homeric honor while sparring with blunted spears. The siblings clashed intellectually as fiercely as they fenced. He argued that destiny crowned conquerors. She countered that destiny favored those who sharpened it daily. Their rivalry, equal parts affection and rivalry, forged two blades from the same ore, each reflecting the other in dangerous brilliance. Yet Senain's formative crucible lay not in palace intrigues, but in the borderlands of Yria homeland of her mother's clan. At 14, she accompanied Odata on a winter inspection of frontier garrisons, riding through pine forests, crusted in rime cloaks, snapping like storm sails. Raiders ambushed the column at dawn. Arrows hissed from white fir boughs. In the chaos, Senain dismounted, rallied a knot of veterans, and executed a counterflank, taught half. In theory, half in instinct. When the skirmish fog lifted, two Illyrian shields bore fresh notches from her blade. The commander offered her a blooded helmet as trophy. She instead ordered it buried with the fallen, arguing that valor should not pillage the dead. Soldiers repeated the story around fires, their voices threading it into legend before the snow thawed. From that winter onward, mother and daughter forged a pact as pragmatic as it was affectionate. Odata would instruct her in clan diplomacy, wolf-low negotiations conducted over mead and oaths, while Senain pledged to modernize border defenses with Macedonian innovations, torsion catapults, interlocking palisades, messenger relays timed by water clocks. Between lessons, they hunted boar in avalanche valleys, testing lung and limb against nature's indifferent cruelty. Each successful stalk proved what palace corridors had only suggested, that command was not conferred by robe or coronet, but by the steady hand that set the spear's course. By 16, the age Philip had once named Senain stood atop the curtain wall of Pella in full cuirass bronze, scaled over leather dyed in Illyrian indigo, the color of cloud-bank shadows before a storm. 50 cavalry trotted below their horses, likewise caparisoned in blue and silver. Some captains scoffed that a girl's escort was pageantry, not power. They fell silent after witnessing her first field exercise, a feigned retreat pivoting into wedge formation that scattered veteran infantry like wheat chaff before a threshing flail. Reports reached Corinth, Athens. Even distant Sardis Macedon's northern sun now rose in two dawns, one named Alexander, the other, a girl whose battle cry cracked like splintering ice. Point 12, therefore, closes Senain's childhood chapter with armor buckled and command assumed. She steps from the nursery's shadow into history's glare, a warrior princess forged by maternal steel and paternal ambition, sharpened by court intrigue, and hardened in border snow. In Point 13, we will follow her south to Yria, where teenage genius meets the crucible of real war, and discover whether the lessons etched into her sinew can outpace the jealous tides already swelling inside Philip's fractious kingdom. Point 12 ended with Senain standing astride Pella's walls in indigo-scaled armor, her 50 light horse shimmering beneath the dawn. Point 13 rides south with that same cavalry as it sweeps toward Yria, the rugged hill realm of her mother's clan, where battlefield triumph will forge her legend, and in the process redraw every border of Macedon's uneasy household. The march begins at equinox, when frost still whitens the plains, but the earliest poppies flare in sheltered gullies. Senain's column is small, 300 riders, and a supply train of mules laden with torsion bow components, but it moves with a precision that belies its size. She has drilled them in silent signals, a lifted fist, to flatten against saddles, a circling forefinger, to fan into pincer half-moons. Where older generals bellow orders that echo off canyon walls, Senain's scouts communicate with mirror flashes, and read whistle code, a tactic she stole from Illyrian goat herders, who guide flocks through fog by bird calls. Thus, well before Irian sentries glimpse Macedonian colors, Senain's vanguard has already mapped river fords, grain caches, and most crucially, the mood of local villagers, weary of clan warlords who tax in livestock and blood. She enters Yria not as conqueror, but as prodigal kin. At every hamlet, she dismounts first, handing her reins to a lieutenant, so both hands are free to clasp elders in the Illyrian greeting wrist to wrist. Foreheads touching a gesture Philip's envoys never bothered to learn. Grain barns open. Cheeses wrapped in nettle leaves appear unbidden. A rumor spreads that Odata's daughter has returned to mend the torn cloak of clan alliance. Yet Senain knows goodwill is a knife that dulls quickly. Two rival chieftains, Gentius of the Bear Banner and Brygos the Reed-Helmed, control Yria's high ridges and demand tribute from all passes. Each commands 3 times her numbers, and their bitter feud keeps valleys bleeding. If she lets them exhaust each other, she might occupy the ruins, but peace built on ashes poisons the future. Instead, she plots what her tutor Aristotle would have called phronesis, practical wisdom, coaxing necessity into virtue. Within 48 hours, her cavalry splits. One wing rides north, stirring dust clouds to simulate a main force. The second melts into the juniper slopes under cloaks daubed with mud and crushed heather, leading pack mules bearing collapsible catapults. Senain herself rides with the silent wing, her indigo armor now dulled by soot, so moonlight will not betray movement. They bivouac in dry creek beds, men sleeping bridled in case of midnight alarms. On the 4th dusk, they crest the Bear's Tooth Ridge above Gentius's encampment, just as the rival clans' war drums rumble from the opposite valley. Senain's engineers assemble torsion bows in near darkness, their only light a shuttered lantern, whose glow never spills higher than a man's knee. When the first catapult stone arcs across the starlit sky and shatters Gentius's signal tower hill, shadows erupt in chaos. Clan horns blare, warriors scramble, and Brygos, seeing flames on his enemy's ridge, orders an immediate assault, believing the gods have delivered perfect opportunity. The ensuing melee below is brutal but brief. Gentius's men pinned between descending reed helms and invisible missiles from the ridgefold within an hour. At the height of the confusion, Senain signals her cavalry to charge not into the fray, but around its edges, cutting supply carts free and ushering prisoners uphill for triage. By dawn, both chieftains kneel before her. Gentius, bloodied yet alive, swears loyalty in exchange for medical care. Brygos, stunned by the impossible coordination of ghosts he never saw, offers hostages and grain. Senain accepts both oaths, but adds a condition none expects. She appoints Gentius to lead a joint foraging corps under Brygos's quartermaster, binding former enemies in cooperative logistics. When her officers question trusting yesterday's foes, she answers, "The safest blade is the one I forge myself. Let their angry sparks temper together under my hammer." News of the lightning victory travels faster than mounted couriers. Shepherd fires blink signals from peak to peak. And by the time Senain's column reaches Yria's walled capital 3 days later, its gates swing open on silent hinges. Inside, clan matrons strew spruce boughs and crushed marigold, a ritual path reserved for bridal processions or funerary heroes. Senain dismounts and kneels to press both palms against the threshold stone, an ancient pledge that she enters as guardian, not ruler. Yet symbolism cannot mask strategy. She replaces the city's crooked wooden palisade with interlocking stakework. Modeled on Macedon's frontier forts, installs water clocks to regulate night watches and trains local youths alongside her cavalry, so the defense of Yria is no longer mercenary but communal. In letters to Philip, she frames each improvement as tribute to the crown, new tax revenues, fresh recruits for the phalanx, knowing the king values output over protocol. In private journals, she writes a sharper calculus. "My mother's homeland is no longer buffer, but bastion. Macedon's spine bends south. Ours braces the north. Word of her success unsettles Pella's marble corridors. Alexander, now 15, and sharpening his own ambitions beneath Aristotle's syllogisms, sends a sparring gift, a silvered helm engraved with twin serpents, a compliment matched with provocation, hinting that two heads may yet contest one throne. Senain replies with a plait of Irian mountain lavender, explaining its medicinal properties against snakebite. The exchange becomes palace gossip, half jest, half omen. Meanwhile, Philip's counselors debate whether to summon his daughter for coronation rites or keep her frontier-bound, where victory is useful, but presence less threatening. The king delays decision, distracted by Thessalian negotiations, and a new bride who stokes palace rivalries like dry tinder, while court factions brood. Senain governs Yria with a rigor that blends Illyrian custom and Macedonian law. She establishes a tribunal where disputes are argued beneath a living oak witness to oaths older than either kingdom, and introduces coinage stamped with both Alexander's and her own profiles, facing outward, symbolizing siblings guarding shared destiny. Economists at court applaud the currency's swift stabilization of grain prices. Traditionalists sputter over dual-visage iconography. Senain ignores both praise and ire, focusing instead on spring planting schedules, rota stables, and a network of signal towers stretching from lake valleys to the Aegean coast, each beacon a heartbeat of newfound integration. Yet beneath this veneer of order, she senses shifting tremors. Prisoners speak of a shadow alliance between disgraced Macedonian nobles and exiled Irian warlords nursing vengeance. Raids against supply convoys increase at moonless intervals. A poisoned arrow fells her beloved Lieutenant Stratton during a routine patrol. She conducts the funeral herself, pouring barley beer onto his pyre and swearing an oath before the assembled troops. For every drop stolen from our veins, I will trade an ocean from theirs. The vow echoes across canyon walls, reverberating all the way to Pella, where a spy reports that Odata's daughter has grown as relentless as winter ice. Senain's next move is neither punitive raid nor retributive execution, but an audacious diplomatic stroke. She invites tribal leaders, loyal, neutral, and hostile alike, to a midsummer moot at Lake Tragos, promising safe passage under sacred truce. Detractors predict ambush. Supporters fear assassination. She counters with a public guarantee: should a single guest come to harm, she will submit to exile and yield command to whatever faction proves most worthy. Such reckless confidence draws even the conspirators eager to test her word. During the moot, she reveals intercepted letters proving that rebel chiefs were mere pawns in a broader plot, orchestrated by a Macedonian noble seeking to destabilize Philip through peripheral chaos. Faced with incontrovertible evidence, wavering clans swing to her banner in a night lit by torch lines that transform the lake shore into a reflected constellation of newfound unity. By autumn, Yria is not merely pacified, but galvanized. Combined cavalry drills with Macedonian officers produce a hybrid wedge capable of splintering pike blocks. Mountain engineers adapt torsion bows into portable cliff-mounted artillery. Senain sends the first contingent of 200 Irian volunteers to Pella to parade beside the king's guard, an unmistakable statement that her authority channels toward, not away from, the central throne. Even skeptical court factions concede that the realm's northern flank has never been stronger. Yet power once tasted alters appetite. As Senain watches her mother, Odata, pin clan brooches onto gleaming Macedonian breastplates, she wonders whether allegiance must always travel southward, or whether a day will come when royal edicts echo outward from Yria's stone citadel instead. Point 13. Therefore seals Senain's reputation as strategist and unifier, a teenage commander who turned rival hills into stepping stones, who weaponized generosity faster than steel, and who sent shockwaves through a royal household already riven by jealousy and prophecy. In point 14, we will trace how her hard-won alliance triggers a cascade of intrigue wedding vows, sharpened into daggers, siblings balanced on a blade's edge, and follow Senain toward the crossroads where triumph bends into tragedy, and the iron rose begins to bleed. Point 13 ended with Senain's victory in Yria, forging a new northern bastion for Macedon, and sending shockwaves through Pella's faction-ridden palace. Point 14 picks up in the midsummer that follows, when Senain, now just 17, chooses marriage not swordplay as her next weapon, unaware that the banquet she choreographs will become the stage for the most calculated betrayal of her short, blazing life. Senain's first move is audacious. She petitions King Philip to betroth his 4-year-old daughter Ada, product of his recent Thessalian union, to Yria's half-Illyrian, half-Macedonian high priest boy heir Nicanor. The match, she argues, will splice the royal bloodline to her mother's clan in permanence fusing Macedon's throne and Yria's hill lords into a single trunk before rival factions can graft their own branches. Philip, beset by Athenian diplomacy and increasingly haunted by Alexander's restless brilliance, views the proposal as a neat solution to 2 headaches. It placates the Illyrian queen consort, Odata, and reins in Senain's rising autonomy by yoking her destiny to a toddler's regency council. He consents, but with a sardonic twist. The wedding must occur in the newly pacified Irian capital, forcing invitational power into Senain's hands and exposing her to every ambition that jockeys for a seat at the feast. Senain prepares with a tactician's precision. Invitations scripted in 3 tongues. Attic Illyrian and the terse runic marks of Thracian coalitions fly out by courier. She designs the festivities as a 3-day tapestry of interwoven rites. Illyrian wolf dance at dawn. Macedonian libation at noon and evening symposium for philosopher diplomats. In private, she coaches 12-year-old Nicanor to recite oaths in flawless Greek schooled by Aristotle's discarded lesson scrolls. She arranges a chamber orchestra to play paeans that shift subtly from Doric austerity to Illyrian pentatonic flair, signaling fusion, not conquest. Even the seating plan is encoded strategy feuding Macedonian nobles placed opposite Illyrian chiefs they once raided, each forced to share bread across a narrow cedar board. But for every chess-like placement she controls, unseen hands move counterpieces. Alexander sends rare Mytilenean wine, ostensibly a gift, actually a bribe he wants. Senain's Irian archers seconded to his own upcoming Thracian campaign. Olympias, Alexander's fierce mother, dispatches snake idols glazed in Orphic silver, a veiled reminder that her epirote blood still pulses through palace veins, whether Senain acknowledges it or not. Most unsettling, a sealed scroll arrives from Demades, the Athenian orator spy, promising a dance of smoke to snuff all torches if Senain will let Attic merchants tap Yria's iron mines. She burns the scroll unanswered, but its ashes leave smudges of foreboding across the day's ledger. The wedding eve dawns clear, though watchers note the lake is so still that dragonflies hover reflectionless, an omen that hides its meaning. Guests pour through the south gate beneath archways draped in twin banners. Macedon's sunburst and Yria's wolf moon entwined. Ada, tiny and solemn in violet silk, takes timid steps beside Nicanor, whose bronze circlet slides over one eyebrow. The crowd cheers the innocence of their union, but every adult eye flickers past the children to the woman who engineered the tableau. Senain, clad in midnight blue lamellar over a white wool dress, embodies paradox warrior and bridesmaid stateswoman and sentinel. Her calm, however, is calibrated. She has stationed scouts in the rafters. Poison tasters at each wine amphora and trusted lieutenants disguised as servers. Even these measures cannot net every adder. Among the throng is Eustathos, a lean Macedonian noble, stripped of borderlands after Senain's Yrian reforms, channeled caravan tolls away from his coffers. He now courts favor with Olympias, who fears her son's path to the crown may zigzag through Senain's influence. Hidden beneath Eustathos's embroidered cloak is a slender poniard coated in hemlock resin, fast-acting, nearly invisible in a shallow wound. His payment, should he succeed, will be restoration of his estate and a marriage alliance into the Queen Mother's Epirote kin. The ceremony unfolds in the citadel atrium under braziers drenched with juniper smoke. A priestess binds Ada's and Nicanor's wrists with wool-dyed half-blue, half-red intoning blessings that reference both Macedon's storm god, Zeus Ammon, and Illyria's moonwolf Dipnos. When the final libation splashes onto the altar horn, blasts signal transition from rite to revel. Tables groan with roast boar barley cakes, glazed in honey, and amphorae of Alexander's wine, now uncorked for toasts. The hall swells with clashing languages. Musicians segue into a drifting lyre motif that loops like river sedge in the wind. Senain lifts a goblet to propose the first toast praise for parents who dream bridges, not borders, when a commotion ripples near the western colonnade. A cup-bearer has collapsed, face pallid. Poison no overindulgence, yet the momentary distraction is Eustathos's opening. He slips past a shield-bearer, edges along the shadow behind a tapestry, and emerges behind Senain just as she lowers her goblet. The poignard flashes toward her kidney. But the girl who once tasted every communal cup has also studied blind spot geometry. She pivots, letting lamellar plates catch the blade's tip. Bronze bunts iron. The knife skitters to the marble floor with a shriek like a hawk on slate. Eustathos lunges for her throat. Instead, his empty fist lands on air as she slides sideways, then drives her elbow into his solar plexus. Guards swarm. Steel rings. The crowd recoils, a tapestry of shocked faces. Senain orders the assailant bound but alive. Laminated armor hides the bruise rising at her waist, a mere inch from fatal miscalculation. She scans the assembly. Across the room, Olympias's snake-braceleted arm rests unnaturally still on a table. Alexander, lips tight, steps forward, as if to speak, then thinks better. Ada begins to cry. Nicanor places a trembling arm around her shoulders, an early lesson that governance begins in crisis. Protocol demands the feast end. Yet Senain refuses to let terror write the night's final chorus. She directs musicians to strike a brisk paean in aulos mode, orders fresh wine, poured only from amphorae sealed before the guest's eyes, and resumes her toast with the same measured cadence, though sweat beads under her helm's rim. Daggers fear light, she declares, voice carrying to rafters. So we will crown this union with brighter torches, not apologies. Applause erupts, half relief, half awe. Even skeptics sense the balance tipping irrevocably toward a commander who can intercept death mid-celebration and still salvage momentum. At dawn, Eustathos is dragged to the courtyard for trial before the mixed Illyrian-Macedonian tribunal Senain instituted months earlier. Under oaks hung with wolf pelts and sunburst shields, he names no mastermind, but his silence condemns him. Few doubt strings pulled from higher chambers. He is sentenced to exile, not execution, a choice that splits the assembly. Some call it mercy. Others whisper it. Leaves a snake alive. Senain insists banishment carries its own terror. A traitor's heartbeat is loudest when no walls shelter it. The verdict replicates her strategy, firm, yet flexible, aimed at avoiding martyrdom that might ignite fresh rebellions. After the guests depart, the Yrian capital feels both fortified and hollow. Wedding garlands wilt atop walls. The scent of juniper clings like aftershave to the barracks. Senain inspects the breach point where Eustathos slipped past a tapestry depicting the Titanomachy. She orders it burned, claiming superstition against images of overthrow. Privately, she knows she cannot thread every needle in the loom of intrigue. Holes will appear. What matters is weaving faster than saboteurs can unravel. In Pella, the incident slithers into rumor mills. Critics brand her ceremony the blood kiss wedding. Olympias feigns outrage at a lack security, while privately praising Eustathos's courage, lamenting only his failure. Alexander reviews Macedonian law on regencies, calculating how Ada's new alliance might reroute inheritance streams. Philip, fatigued by constant palace vendettas issues, a curt decree: Senain is to present herself at court within 3 months for commendation and counsel. Some read invitation, others summons. Senain prepares for the journey with contradictory emotions triumph, because her gamble has cemented Yria's bond to the royal line. Vigilance because court serpents now know their strike distance. And a shard of dread because returning to Pella means stepping onto a stage where applause may mask the scraping of sharpened blades. She entrusts Yria's governance to a council blending clan matrons, Macedonian logisticians, and Nicanor's regency stewards, an unprecedented fusion she hopes will outlive her shadow. Before departing, she walks the lakeshore at dusk, water-bruised violet beneath a crescent moon. Steps crunch behind her. Odata joins silent. Mother and daughter stand without words, listening to loons call across black water. Finally, Odata says, "The deeper the iron sinks in, quench the stronger it returns to anvil." Senain replies, "And the hotter the forge, the brighter the sparks that escape." They clasp wrists, warriors farewell. Point 14. Thus pivots our tale from battlefield glory to courtly undercurrents. Senain survives the wedding knife, but the assassination attempt exposes fissures yawning beneath Macedonia's freshly laid alliances. In Point 15, we will follow her south along the royal road through ambushes of rhetoric, sharper than spears, toward a capital where sibling love can flip to rivalry, faster than a coin bearing their twin faces, where the iron rose must learn that even steel petals bruise when crushed by imperial ambition. Point 14, closed with Senain riding south under royal summons, her indigo cloak trimmed by the same torchburn that singed a wedding knife from the shadows. Point 15, follows that summons eastward, beyond Pella's marble courtyards, and into the dry valleys, where Europe blurs into Asia terrain as treacherous as any court corridor. Here the Iron Rose will discover that victories hammered on frontier anvils can shatter like clay in the kiln of imperial ambition. The journey begins under a harvest moon. Senain leads a compact escort of 200 Yrian cavalry and 50 Macedonian hypaspists, assigned by Philip for honors show. She reads the mixed detail as equal parts accolade and leash. Olympias's stamped seal on the hypaspist's orders suggests the Queen Mother prefers her son's rivals well observed. Alexander remains at Pella ostensibly preparing maps for a Thracian thrust, but his absence from the farewell portico feels louder than trumpets. He sends a parting scroll. Instead, brotherhood is the finest whetstone. Senain pockets the cryptic note beside Odata's wolf-tooth charm and rides east toward the Hellespont. For 9 days, the column advances in disciplined silence. At dusk, they bivouac beneath cedar-striped skies. At dawn, they drill wedge maneuvers across stubble fields as though rehearsing for an unseen examiner. Peasant villages greet them with wary deference. Word of the wedding attack travels faster than hoofbeats. Senain dismounts at every well to taste water first, still honoring her poison ritual. yet vigilance cannot plug invisible leaks. Each innkeeper's bow might mask allegiance, each blacksmith's forge could double as message beacon. Somewhere ahead, a cabal tracks her passage like a hawk circling a hare. That cabal germinates in Pella the night she departs. Olympias convenes 3 disgruntled noble houses, Stratocles Antipater's cousin, Eustathos's widowed sister, and Nicanor of Pieria, who once lost a timber concession when Senain rerouted river tolls. She argues that Philip's aging spine will soon crack beneath competing heirs. Alexander's path to the crown must be cleared now before the king's infirmity invites civil war. Senain, she insists, may not desire the diadem, but her growing legend could rally Illyrian and Irian blades behind Ada's regency, eclipsing the prince. A corrective accident beyond Macedon's borders will look like frontier banditry, not palace conspiracy. Stratocles funds the mercenaries. Nicanor supplies forged Persian coins to implicate foreign hands. Olympias dispatches a trusted page to shadow Senain's entourage and report ideal ambush ground. On the 12th day, Senain's column enters the Phrygian gate, 2 weather-gnawed spurs forming a funnel where cold mountain air exhales like a smith's bellows. The Aegean's salt tang vanishes. Dust tastes iron sharp. Scouts return with news that the forward ridge is clear, yet a faint glint sunlight on unfamiliar spearheads pricks her instinct. She doubles flank pickets and sends Captain Thera, her childhood spar partner, to sweep the ravines. As the sun tilts west, a shepherd boy wanders into camp offering goat cheese. Saintin's poison tester samples the curd coughs once and drops. The boy bolts. Arrows hiss from both slopes. First volley aimed at mounts hobbling escape. Second volley at tents, where officers cluster around maps. Within heartbeats, her column is ringed by 300 mercenaries in mismatched armor, their shields painted over with crude Persian sigils. Senain rallies a defensive corral. Irian horsemen knee-to-ground shields interlocked, forming a thorned circle around supply wagons and Ada's miniature litter. The high paspists assigned by Olympias hold rear position on paper. In reality, half melt into the attacking line, revealing their true employer. Betrayal punches harder than arrows. Thera drags poison tester behind barrels and snaps orders torsion bows to the rim counter volley at highest arcs. Springs groan. Stone bullets sail cracking helmets like pottery. But attackers press confident of numbers and the bottleneck terrain. Senain locates the shepherd boy's discarded cloak inside a bronze whistle. She recalls Illyrian goatherd code, 3 fast blasts summon hill watchdogs. Risky, but desperation thins doubt. She blows thrice. Moments stretch. Then from crags above, echoing horn replies, Gentius and Brygos. The once feuding chieftains she bound in logistics months earlier were escorting ore caravans toward the coast and recognized her signature camp standards. Their 100 outriders crest the ridge howling wolf chants. Surprise flips the battle's hinge. Mercenaries expecting isolated prey now face fresh cavalry skirmishing downhill. Dust swirls into choking curtains. Friend and foe blur. In the melee, a masked lancer charges straight for Senain Eustathos's ex-lieutenant, now bounty hunter. She parries twice, hooks his elbow, and yanks him onto the shield wall, demanding the paymaster's name. He spits snake's coil in royal beds. A high paspist's spear thrust interrupts. The prisoner slumps dead. Clue enough. Rage compresses into clarity, escape matters more than retribution. She signals Ada's litter eastward along a goat track. Thera's scouts marked earlier. Thera Gentius and a shrinking knot of riders form breakaway wedge, smashing through lighter infantry. Arrows chase but fade as dusk blots the gorge crimson-purple. They ride through night-lamed horses, staggering until torches appear atop a seaside promontory, an abandoned Carian watchtower now garrisoned by Brygos's caravan escort. Within its cyclopean walls, Senain counts losses, 50 Yrian dead, 30 Macedonian loyalists fall in Thera, bleeding from thigh to shin, but alive. Ada, soot-streaked, yet unbroken, asks if this was diplomacy. Senain forces a grin. The harsh, dialect little cub. Dawn reveals the mercenaries withdrew unwilling to assault Stone without payment guarantee. Yet retreat is no victory, supplies are gone. Horses spent, and worse, the ambush's Persian staging risks war Philip cannot afford. Senain dictates dispatches to Pella, one scroll detailing facts for the king. Another coded missive to Alexander citing Brotherhood Whetstone and warning that his mother's edge draws blood indiscriminately. A third letter to Odata simply reads, "Wolves smell poison on the wind." Guard the cubs. While scribes ink parchment, a captured mercenary wounded, but speaking confesses payment routes traced to Pierian estates. Stratocles' name surfaces amid coin crates. Shock, but no surprise. Senain faces a forked path, return to Pella, and lay evidence before Philip, risking the king's wrath for dragging Persia's specter into domestic feud, or push onward across the Hellespont to rendezvous with Macedonian vanguards massing for Asia Minor, proving her loyalty where deeds outvoice plots. She chooses forward. Asia's plains will grant open maneuver. The ambush has branded her a marked piece on Pella's chessboard, safer moved than shelved. Before departing, she conducts hilltop funerals, a ring of cairns built from collapsed watchtower stones, each etched with dual sunwolf sigils. Over Thera's protest, she leads the first shovel. Sweat and tears blur. Lamellar plates clink with every heave. At sunset, she addresses survivors. Tonight we cross water once sailed by heroes. Leave grief on this shore. Carry only rage forged to discipline. Ada watches small face reflecting flame glow absorbing lesson after lesson, too swiftly for any child. They board grain barges at dawn sails, catching a stiff northerly. From the stern, Senain views Europe's receding cliffs, their silhouettes jagged like broken spears. She fingers Alexander's cryptic note Brotherhood Whetstone and wonders if sibling steel must always clash to stay sharp. Beneath deck, Brygos's scouts whisper of bounty notices circulating Smyrna taverns, Illyrian she-wolf alive, if possible, head acceptable. The price equals a minor fortress's treasury. As the Hellespont narrows to a glassy throat, gulls wheel overhead, their cries shredded by wind. Senain closes her eyes and imagines those gulls as advance scouts of destiny, white slashes against gathering storm. Ahead lies Asia, hot and wide, where Philip's campaign may birth empire or shatter under familial fault lines. Behind trails, a viper's path etched in mountain dust, a warning that even fused banners can fray when ambition pulls opposite ends. The Iron Rose tightens her gauntlet-feeling pulse drum beneath leather. Whatever waits beyond the strait, Persian arrows, Macedonian daggers, or the jealous gods of new horizons, she will meet it in motion. Petals of steel flared for one final bloom. Point 15 leaves Senain, halfway between worlds, exiled from safe politics, hunted by her own kin, yet defiant on the prow of history's next invasion. In the closing, Point 16, we will witness whether her brilliance can outpace conspiracies that seed even the ranks she leads, and how a child princess named Ada will inherit not just a crown, but the embers of a sister's unstoppable fire. From the dusty threshing floors of ancient Attica to the blood-bright ridges of Yria, our journey has followed one unbroken thread. People turn chaos into story so they can survive it. Theater began as ritual chant sharpened into satire before uneasy kings, and now projects LED constellations across modern stages, yet every mask still echoes the same hungers for truth, wonder, and warning. So too with Senain, the Iron Rose forged her own script on battlefield and banquet table, proving that a single voice, when disciplined by purpose, can redirect empires and outshout conspiracy. Whether you meet her on a moonlit, no bridge in Kabuki thunder, or at the prow of a grain barge bound for Asia, remember the lesson. Her life and all theater teach history is just rehearsal until someone dares to step forward and speak their part. So keep listening, keep questioning, and when your cue arrives, take the stage.